Yeah, absolutely. Well, first off, welcome everybody, friends new and old. Good to see everybody. We've got a great crew and a great speaker lined up for tonight, so we're really excited to get things going. Won't take too long here. So to kind of get us started, we always start every event with an acknowledgement of our code of conduct. So this event, our virtual spaces and our in-person spaces, when we're able to have them, are all governed by the code of conduct on our website, serverless.mn. And we have that because we're dedicated to providing a harassment-free meetup experience for everybody. If there's anything we can do to help, or if you need to make a code of conduct report, please contact AJ, Eve, or myself. In these virtual spaces, you can find us in the personnel dashboard there on the participant dashboard. But you can also email us at organizers@serverless.mn. Our Zoom event tonight comes to us from AJ and is provided by Serverless Inc., the makers of the serverless framework. So I will definitely give them a shout out every time because Zoom is not nothing. I pay for Zoom for work reasons, and we really appreciate that because for many reasons, without AJ, we would not have this event. But especially, you got to have some sort of software to do these remote events in order for that to work. So thanks again to Serverless Inc. And to AJ. Also like to thank all my co-organizers, AJ and Eve, full rock stars. We've been so excited to keep this going, even in the midst of the pandemic. Next time, we have a lot of really cool events coming up in the next couple months. We've got Jeremy Daly, who AJ, I think you said was from New Relic. Is that right?
No, Jeremy's does his own. He runs the Serverless Chats podcast.
Oh,
and,
right. Yep.
Does it? Yep.
Sorry about that. I
great newsletter. Really excited to have him talk. I have to circle back with him on a topic. I was supposed to get it tonight, and I haven't heard back from him. But I know he's got a family and normal life obligations, so we'll forgive him for that, and we'll get a topic for next time. But stay tuned. And then coming up, New Relic will be chatting as well. So. Lots of great stuff coming up. Stay tuned to our website. You can find more information on our Twitter feed. I plugged our website in the chat as well. You guys all found your way here this evening, folks. So grateful for that, and hopefully we'll catch you again at the next one. Any other announcements?
No, AJ, take it away.
All right. So tonight I'm really happy to present Ali Spittel from the AWS Development Relations team. She's been working for about 6 months on the AWS Amplify team. Really excited to hear about this. I'm sure you folks were aware of the new admin UI that just launched for Amplify. That's what she's going to be taking us through a tour today and building an app with us. So can't wait. Really excited to have you, Ali. Thank you so much. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. I also live in the Midwest, not in Minnesota, but in Chicago. So it's really fun to see the center of the country represented here, and also to be in the same time zone. It's always so nice that I'm not adding or subtracting hours here. But as they said, I am a developer advocate specifically on the Amplify team. So I spend all day, every day working with Amplify pretty much. But I am relatively new to the team. I'm about 6 months in. So some of you all may know some of the things that I'm talking about really well, and maybe even better than I do. So just in case you have any really out there questions, I may pass on them and try to answer them offline tomorrow or something along those lines. As we're going through, feel free to put any questions in Zoom. I hope that this will still be up when I move to screen sharing. Let me actually do that right now.
Go for it. You should have permissions, and let me know if there's a problem with that, and I'll press the buttons on my side.
Okay, wait. So there's my desktop. And then let me go into presentation mode. Amazing. Can you all see that?
Yeah, it looks great.
Okay, amazing. It looks like I don't have chat anymore. So if anybody wants to just come off mute and ask me questions, or the organizers, if you want to ask me questions from the Zoom chat, that's totally fine. I'll also pause for questions at the end and stop screen sharing so I have access to chat again. So Zoom is always fun. We're going to be talking about the AWS Amplify Admin UI tonight. It's going to allow us to build a backend for an application in clicks. I'm so excited about this. This just launched at reInvent. There are a couple of features that are still in beta, but overall, it's working really well. I've built a ton with it so far, including testing it before it was out in the open. So hopefully everything will go well tonight, but we will be doing a lot of live coding. So I'm sure the gremlins will come out at some point. I already introduced myself, but our goals tonight are to build a fun application. We're going to build a blog out mostly just to show the relationships between data and show you a bunch of the different features. We're going to talk about the underlying services as well, because Amplify puts a layer on top of a lot of other AWS services that you may be more familiar with. So we'll talk about those as we go as well, so you can learn a little bit more about the AWS ecosystem too, in case you want to know about those. And then we'll also talk a lot about Amplify, which is what I work on a lot. So the Amplify Admin UI, we're going to be using this throughout tonight. Again, it just launched at reInvent, so you're going to be one of the first people ever to see a conference talk about this or a meetup talk about it. So that's pretty exciting. What we're going to do is first we're going to create our data. So we're going to create a backend schema for our data first. We're then going to test our data locally. We're going to build a React app and use our data within that React app. And this step, you actually still do not need an AWS account to do this. So you can build out the backend, you can integrate it into your application, get it exactly where you want it to go, and then you can deploy it after that. And that's the step that you will need to make an AWS account, and we'll need to get it up on AWS from there. And when we do that step, we will be generating an admin console as well for your application, which is really nice. We've talked to a lot of developers, and I know this too from my life as a developer, that a lot of times when you're building an application, you're first building the application for the end user that regular people use, but then you also end up having to build a second application for the people who manage your content. So you have to have something that your content people can edit that data in, or your developers can go into that console to like see what the data is in there. So the admin console is going to take care of that for you. You can also manage your authentication through there, which we're going to do as well. And if we have time, which I'm hoping we will, we'll also use the Amplify CLI or a command line interface to extend this. And we'll show you that you can do all the things that you have done in the Amplify CLI if you've used that before, to have access to all the things that Amplify does. To take a step back, Amplify is a set of AWS tools for front-end and mobile developers. I think traditionally AWS is known for like the heavy back-end side of things, of like EC2 and data pipelines and all of that. But Amplify specifically focuses on front-end and mobile developers and making it so that you can use those AWS tools in a more accessible way, and speaking more to that audience than the general developers. We started off with the Amplify CLI and the Amplify console. So the CLI allows you to use the command line to generate a bunch of AWS services, backends, and APIs. You can do Lambda functions through that as well. And then we also have the Amplify console, which is for static site hosting originally. You can do all the like building or create React app and putting it on AWS and then add a domain and all that. So that's another service that we cover. And then finally, we have this new admin UI. And those are the kind of the three things that we mostly manage. And so I think that there have been these different eras in full stack web development. So first off, there was the early days of writing HTML and CSS mostly, and then maybe you had some data layer at some point that was added on. And then the next era were these web frameworks that really decided how you were going to write your application. So Ruby on Rails, Django, this is really the era that I started writing code, and I spent a lot of my early life as a developer in Django and Ruby on Rails and generating applications through those. And they definitely made programming and building web apps much easier than it was before. But you still had to deploy your apps pretty manually and think about all of those deployment processes yourself and scaling and all of that. So I remember like setting up Nginx and all that on my own servers back in the day, or getting things up on EC2, which is awesome. But definitely a lot of work still there. And then most recently, there has been serverless, which makes that deployment process a lot easier. You may have used the Lambda functions, and this is a serverless meetup. So I feel like you all probably are pretty versed in that already. I've been spending my last week pretty much immersed in serverless Flask, which has been really fun to work with, which is a Python framework. But I kind of see this evolution of web development and making it so that these things are more and more accessible for developers to use. I've also started to hear this conversation about low code recently, and I think a lot of developers really hate that term, and I understand it because it's like, are our jobs no longer going to exist in a couple of years? Like, what's going on there? And then there's also is this a really annoying interface that I have to drag and drop things and deal with that? Like, I tried to build a Squarespace site, and it was really not fun. I think that's maybe what people think of with low code, and think that maybe fits that definition. But I also think this Amplify Admin UI in a lot of ways is low code. And I think in some ways it has a nice comparison with serverless, where serverless takes care of a lot of your deployment for you. You don't have to worry about scaling as much. And then I think low code makes it so that you have to do less of the development yourself. You still have to know how to write code. You still have to extend your business logic using code and all that. But the less code that you have to write means the less code that you have to maintain. And as things scale, you don't have to worry too much about upgrading things and having things break. So I'm excited about this idea of low code. I also have worked with beginner developers for a while. And so the idea of making it easier and easier for them to write code is really exciting for me as well. So I don't know if no code is the future or low code is the future, but I'm excited about this Amplify Admin UI because it's going to make it so that you have to write less code for your application. You don't have to worry about the deployment at all. And this will hopefully lead to less maintenance and less bugs because there's less code that you need to write. So that being said, extensibility, customizability, developer experience, also really, really important, even when we talk about low code. And so hopefully we'll have tools in the future, and hopefully this is a tool that has that we can continue building on top of that to make code more and more accessible to more people. So we are going to go ahead and generate an application and write some code. I'm going to go to sandbox.amplifyapp.com in just a second. I'm going to talk about a couple things first, and then we'll head there. But this is where the Amplify Admin UI lives before you deploy it. So this is your like local version of your backend that you can create. So we'll do that in just a minute. So if you want to navigate there to go on your computer, you can, but it's also a meetup, so don't feel the need to. I just know that some people like to have things up on their computer as we go. So that's the URL we're going to use. So the first thing that we're going to do is model our data. We're going to create a database schema visually. This is what the editor is going to look like. And we're going to use a couple AWS services for this. The first one is Data Store, and this one's built into Amplify. It allows you to have offline and online data, and it's just as easy to have that data be offline as it is online. I used to work for Dev2. Anybody here use Dev2? It's like a social media platform just for developers. Yeah, it's fun. It's a really great app. It's how I started blogging. I think it's a really great community if you're not involved already. But a big use case that we had was trying to make it so that our web app was as performant as possible. And so my first project before I actually started there was building their offline page, and you can draw on it. It's pretty fun. You should check it out. Turn off your internet and go to dev2.com or just dev.to, not .com. Anyways, so Data Store handles that offline scenario for you. So your data is stored on the device and people can access it even if they're not connected to the internet. This is really especially helpful for mobile developers. Having it for the web is really nice too, but I know that that's a big thing that mobile developers have to implement. And again, you don't have to add anything extra for that. It just does it automatically for you. In the browser, it's using IndexedDB. So that's how that works. Then AppSync. AppSync is another AWS service, and it allows you to do GraphQL, essentially. It allows you to do GraphQL APIs. This one kind of falls under my mobile team that I'm on as well. So use this one a lot. And then the last one that we're going to use for data is our database. And we're going to be using DynamoDB. It's a serverless, NoSQL, key value pair document database, and it's highly scalable. So those are the 3 services that we're going to be using under the hood for our data. So they're all established AWS things. They're not new in themselves, just this admin UI that is making it easier to use them. So I'm going to transition over to the sandbox, the amplifyapp.com. And before I do that, does anybody have any questions for me? And you can come off of mute. Oh, wait, I see the chat. Figured it out.
I think Clayton has a quick question for you. I don't know if you see that, but I can read it quick. What is Data Store using on mobile?
That is a great question. I have not actually ever done mobile development, so I'm the wrong person to ask about that. My whole life has been in web development, but I can look into that and answer tomorrow. If you like leave your Twitter handle or something, I can look into it. Sorry about that. Cool. So on the sandbox page, I'm going to click Get Started and then Data. And I'll start with a blank schema. You can also you can also start with a starter one if you want to see an example, but I'll just start from scratch. And what I'll do is I'm going to create 2 models, blog or posts and comments. So a blog would have the article stored in one model, and then the comments that people leave on that blog as another model. I wouldn't recommend enabling comments for your real life blog, but it's good for the practice of looking at a data model here. So I just clicked add and then add model, and I will do post. The ID is already going to be there for me. It's a primary key, so it's going to be generated. We don't need to do that. Then we'll also do, I'll do title first, and I'll keep that as a string, and then text, which will also be a string. You can also choose from different data types here too. So if I wanted to add like a posted at, or if I wanted to add a published or something like that, I could make it into a Boolean field, JSON fields, all of those. So you can choose there. And then I'm also going to add the comment, and that one will have text and then author. And I'm going to make it so that a couple of these fields are required. So my title will be required. All my blogs posts have to have titles, and all of them need to have text. And my comments will need to have text and author. I'm also going to add a relationship between the 2 models. So I'm going to flip that. I'm going to make it so that one post has many comments. You can do a many-to-many instead if you want a comment to belong to many posts. That would probably make more sense for like friend type relationships or something along those lines, or you can do a one-to-one as well. And then you can rename the relationship if you want. I'm just gonna change it to a lowercase c. You could keep it as well. Okay, so then I'll click test locally in your app, and you can see that there are different options right here. I'm going to build a React app out. but you can choose from different like iOS and Android as well. Again, I've never done that before, so I'm not going to start tonight, but if you're interested, you can definitely do one of those instead. And then I'm going to open up my terminal. And whoa, what happened to my font? There we go. Much better. I'm going to create a new React app. So I'm just calling it Amplify blog. And call it whatever though. I've also been doing a lot of Next apps recently, which I think are really fun. It does so many of the same things that I know and love with Create React app, but it also has the server-side rendering and static site generation, which is really nice as well. And honestly, it's not too much more to learn next once you know React. Anybody have a favorite web framework to use? You can like leave it in the comments or the Zoom chat. Next.js fans, I feel like everybody is turning over to there if you use React and Vue. Have you been using Next? Awesome. Lots of Next fans. Cool. And then from there, I'm going to get this to install the Amplify CLI, which I already have installed, but I think this will update it. I have the latest version. Awesome. And then I'm also going to run this Amplify pull with the sandbox ID and then the application ID. And this will make it so that my front end is tied to my Amplify app. And so you get a lot of green check marks as this goes on for things that have been successfully done. Yeah, I used to write a lot of Vue code, but recently I've been just doing more React for no good reason other than that I used to teach React for a lot of years. And so I feel like I almost think in React at this point. But if you want a Next type experience, Next.js is really great as well. Ooh, do I find that React is a steeper learning curve than Vue? I think if you know vanilla JavaScript pretty well already, then vanilla JavaScript to Vue is a smaller step than vanilla JavaScript to React, just because of the it feels a little bit more like just JavaScript than Vue does, than React does, I think. React, you have to get used to the virtual DOM and all of that. And JSX too, that also is a steeper thing with React. But then again, I always do recommend React as well because there are just so many jobs with it right now. So many jobs. Vue is great too though. And another question, does Amplify have a free tier? It does. It falls under the AWS free tier that goes for the first year. So it falls under that, and all the different underlying services have their own free tier as well. So it gets a little bit complicated, but all of them do have that. And also just worth noting that all of this sandbox stuff, I don't even need to have an AWS account for this. There's no billing or anything like that up until this point. The billing would kick in after we deploy. I have like 30. I have the maximum number of Amplify apps on my account, which is usually 25 at a time. And it's still free for me every month, But then again, not a lot of people are using these apps that I use for demos. So it would start costing more if you have a lot of users on it. But if they're all just demo toy apps, like I've been creating for these, can't promise that it's not going to charge you, but in my experience, it's been not bad at all. But I also would recommend putting on a billing alarm when you create an AWS account. That's good AWS hygiene for sure. Cool. And that's also awesome to hear about my React video with Jason. That was so much fun a couple weeks ago. And I'm going to install AWS Amplify and TypeScript. TypeScript is just necessary for the schema generation. It uses TypeScript under the hood. And so in order to have the strict typing on it, we need to have TypeScript installed. And then AWS Amplify is going to have a bunch of front-end tools that we can use within our JavaScript app to make this a little bit more straightforward. And all of this code that I'm running is coming from this page right here. It's telling me what to do step by step by step, which is really nice. It's like copy and paste driven development to an extent. But instead of having to search Stack Overflow, it's here for you already. Almost there. And now we've got everything installed. I'm going to open this up in my text editor. And you can see that when I ran those commands, a lot of things were generated. The source is going to just be, for the most part, things that Create React app created for us. There are a couple other things we'll look at in there in a minute, but this Amplify directory has configuration information. You don't need to worry about that. You don't need to worry about the scripts. And you don't really need to worry about the backend either. The one thing that I want to show you is this schema.graphql file. And this has the GraphQL schema for that data model that we just created. And if you're not familiar with GraphQL, it's this really great query language that allows you to get exactly the data that you want in your application. You don't need to use this though. It's just if you want to modify any of your data in here. So if I wanted to change text to an int or something like that, I could do that within this file. Or if I wanted to add another field or anything like that, you can go to the schema.graphql file and edit it. And then there's also this schema.dts. Let's see, it's this index TypeScript file right here. And this has TypeScript definitions for our data as well. You don't need to write TypeScript or anything like that. It's just making it so that in our JavaScript code, we're going to have to fit our model as well. TypeScript is just like JavaScript. It just enforces the types of your data. So it makes it so that something is really a string when you expect it to be a string, whereas JavaScript uses duck typing, which is if it walks like a duck, it talks like a duck, it's a duck. That's how data kind of works within JavaScript. TypeScript is a little stricter than that. But again, you don't need to write GraphQL. You don't need to write TypeScript. Just showing you that these things exist. The last file that was generated that I want to talk about is this AWS exports, which for now just has an empty object in it. But once we deploy this application, this AWS exports will be updated with all the links to our production things. So like, where is our database and what different passwords do we need to have saved and all that. And it's get ignored, so it won't get pushed, but there is that. That's going to have all of our configuration information. Any other questions for me real quick before I start writing some more code?
I have a really quick question. I think it's super cool that that schema.graphql gets generated and you can just pull it down. When you're in the process of iterating, can you come back to this UI and recreate that?
Yes, for sure. So once we
Nice.
deploy this, or actually at this point as well, I can go back to the model tab and update this. And then I would just need to rerun the amplify pull command, and that's going to update everything. And once you deploy this, you'll have access to this as well. So you'll have access to the schema generator at all points. But if for some reason you like writing it in your code instead, you can also do it within the schema GraphQL. Either way.
Super cool. Thanks.
For sure. And this is what I like about this low code type scenario. And I don't know if that's the right term, so I feel a little bit weird about it. But the nice thing is you can use this visual editor to update your data. Like say you're a super front-end developer, haven't worked with data before. I feel like this feels a lot more comfortable than editing your data within code, but you can still extend it with your own code if you need to, or if you want to. So I'm going to open up my index.js. And if you're not familiar with React, that is totally fine. We're going to focus more on the admin UI than the React portion of it. We just need it to choose some sort of front-end framework, so that's what we're going to go with. And there are these 3 lines of code that I'm going to copy and paste into here. And what these lines of code do is import Amplify from that AWS Amplify JavaScript library we installed. It's going to import my configuration from that AWS exports that I just showed you. Right now it's an empty object, but it will be generated once we deploy our application. And then it is configuring our Amplify app for our front end. So now our front end and back end are linked. I also got a question, if I leave in the middle of the process, could I resume from where I left off in the Amplify portal? I wouldn't rely on it. From what I've seen, it normally brings you back to the correct one, but I would probably deploy it before you leave it alone. That would be my 2 cents there. But once you deploy it, it'll be great, and you can always come back to it, and it'll be exactly what you need it to be. Amazing. It also has code generated for us for our data and how to query it, how to use it. So what I'm going to do is switch over to my app.js. And in here, I'm going to create a fun little set of inputs to create a new blog. So I'm going to switch over to my post model right here. So I have the option of post and comment. And I'm going to import use effect from React. And use effect is just going to allow me to write any code that produces side effects. And in practice, what that's going to allow me to do is make it so that this only runs when the page loads instead of rerunning every single time my component re-renders. Essentially, if I didn't use the use effect, I might create an infinite loop or something like that. So if you're new to React, that's why I'm doing that there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it so that a new post is created when I load the page, at least just for now while I'm testing this out. So I need to make an asynchronous function in here. Then I need to call it right here. I just can't make the function inside of the callback function inside of use effect async. So I need to create a function within a function, which is a little funky, but that's a React thing more than anything. And then I'm going to say const new post equals new post. What am I doing? Oh, wait, I'm doing that in the wrong place. Okay. Writing live code. Oh my goodness, always goes wrong. And then I will console log that new post. Oop, I need to remove my React logo. Okay. And so now when my page loaded, it created a new comment for me. No, it created a new post for me. Sorry, I saw the comment there and was like, I thought I was doing post. I was doing post. So I created a new blog post with text and a title. Both of them are lorem ipsum for now. Now I'll comment this out for now. And what I'll do is I will change out these lines of code to make it so that instead I am calling to get all of my posts from my database. And so if I switch over to query right here, it'll give me a line of code to get all of my posts. So I am querying data store. And again, data store is going to give my data both locally and in my database so that other users can use it. So it's cross user, but also available offline. And I will change my variables. So const posts equals awaiting that data store.query. And then I'm also going to do use state, and I'm going to store my posts in state. Again, this is just React stuff. This is going to make it so that my posts persist and also trigger a re-render of my component once they load. So I will change this console log to set posts. And if I look here, you can see that in refreshing that page, I created 2 posts. Both of them have lorem ipsum text for now, but I've got 2 posts saved in data store right now. You can also see them in IndexedDB. You can see them there if you want to see them too. They're stored in that IndexedDB, which is a local storage in your browser. Also, feel free to answer any questions. I know I'm flying through the React code. It's mostly because I don't want to teach React. I mostly want to just focus on this admin UI, but I totally understand if I'm being confusing because I'm going through it so fast. Okay, I'm also going to add a button to my page so that I can create a new post on click. So button create new post, and I'll do on click equals create post, which will be a function. And what I'll do is I'll copy this create post down into this. And what I'll do is instead of doing lorem ipsum text, I'll do window.prompt. And I will do the same for text. And for now, we'll leave comments off of there. So by default, when we create a new blog post, we don't want comments to come with it. So we won't worry about that for now. But now when I do this create new post, it should ask me for a post title and it's text. And then when I refresh the page, posts, there are 3, including the my new text and my new post that I created. So now we have it so that you get all the posts when the page loads, and then also you can click the button to create a new post and saves them into data store. Cool. So that's the test in your app portion of this. Again, if at any point I want to change the structure of my data, say I want to add an order field to the comments or something along those lines, I could go back to the model tab, and that tab would allow me to update the data. I would just rerun Amplify pull to get that into our application. The next step that we're going to do is deploy to AWS. I have an AWS account, but it also guides you through creating one if you don't. It'll ask you for your application name. So mine will be Amplify Blog. And then it will deploy. It might take a little bit. So while we do this, I'll go back to my slides. First off, does anybody have any questions? I'm looking at the chat right now. Also, feel free to come off mute too, if that's easier.
Ali, I do have a question. And this might be, so it's funny because I'm at a different stage, maybe than you all, as far as like my, full stack dev knowledge. I'm in a boot camp right now, but
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And your learn with Jason React video really helped me out as far as understanding the passing in components on React and all that. But just out of curiosity, so if I had from a use case perspective, if I had a marketing team, right, and you mentioned creating that that second application so that content editors or marketers don't have to code, they can essentially use this as a CMS, maybe like a WordPress or something. Is that possible on this?
Yeah. So once we deploy it, once the deployment phase is done, wait, it finished deploying already, it looks like. Very exciting. Let me open this up. So we can manage our application content right in here. Okay, and it's still deploying, but we'll have that available to us once it's done deploying. Wow. So it'll have full create, read, update, delete, where we can see the data that's been created already. We can create new instances. We can update the data that's already there and delete things. And we can actually do the same for authentication too, once we enable that. And does Amplify have an opt-in to handle sign-in and users? Yes, we're going to use Cognito for that as our next step. Cool. So right now the deployment is still going, but we have access to this admin UI, and this is going to allow us to update that data model like we were doing before. This button right here brings us to the same interface that we were using for creating our schema, and then also this for enabling authentication. And again, feel free to stop me at any point if I'm going too fast or too slow or anything like that as well, just because I know everybody's at a different place. Okay, so back to the slides. We did the test in your app, which again, you can use React or you can use Next.js, you can use Vue, you can use iOS or Android as well. That goes beyond framework. You just need to have a bundler. So if you use vanilla JavaScript without a framework, just use something like Parcel or something like that to bundle your front end. Then right now we're doing the deploy to AWS, which is putting our app out into the world so other people can use it, not just us. And once it's deployed, you can send that link to anybody and they can have access to it. And then we're going to get to the manage your application phase. So we have talked a little bit about the data modeling. We can also edit the application content. We'll see that in a minute, but you can also set up authentication and add users and user groups. You can also add authenticate or authorization roles as well, which is giving certain users permissions to do certain things and restricting others. So if we wanted only admin users to be able to create blog posts or only admins to be able to delete comments or something along those lines, we can enable that in the admin UI as well, which is like my favorite feature because that is so annoying to do in code yourself. So really excited about that. And under the hood for authentication, we're going to use Amazon Cognito, which is a managed authentication service. It has a lot of really great things built into it. So one of my favorite things is using two-factor authentication and social authentication because both of those are always kind of nightmares to implement yourself as well, but they're really helpful for those end users to have. I know that I always do like one-click sign-in with Gmail, so very helpful to have those in your application. And we'll check on this to see where it's at with deploying. Oh yeah, that's also a great question, is if Amplify will create one DynamoDB table for each model, or is it possible to do a single table design? So a lot of people do like single table design within DynamoDB. Amplify by default will do new tables for every model. So each model will be in its own table, but you can kind of go around Amplify by using Amplify add storage and then the NoSQL option within that. And then you have full access to your database schema yourself. So you could do something single table there if you really wanted to. Or you could just use one model for your whole application and then it would be single table as well. Cool, so it is now deployed. So you can see that we have access to our data model right here. So if you wanted to update anything, you could do that. If you wanted to add more fields or change the data types of fields or anything like that, you can do so. And then once you do that, it's going to have to redeploy and you will rerun the command amplify pull with these arguments on it, and then you'll have access to those changes that you did. So it kind of works like Git, where with Git you amplify pull, or you get pull and get push. Pull brings down the changes on GitHub to your local machine, and if you do get push, it pushes those local changes. The same thing is true for Amplify. So Amplify pull pulls any changes that you make through this admin UI into your application. And then Amplify push pushes any changes from your local application up into this. So if I changed something in that GraphQL schema and wanted to get that deployed, I would run Amplify push to get there. And then the authorization, I'm going to have to add auth first. So let me do this. Enable auth right here. You can add different login mechanisms. I'm just going to do email for sake of the presentation, but if you want to do Google or Amazon or Facebook, you can do that as well. You can also turn on multi-factor authentication. So if you want to do like enforced or optional, you can do that there. You can also take more attributes from your users as they sign up. So you could make them add in their birthday. So you could like birthday email them or something like that. You could make them do a picture. And then there is different password protection settings. So if you want to make it so that passwords need to be more or less secure, you can do that here as well. I'm just going to do the default and save and deploy that. And that's a great question. What is the difference between the sandbox and the UI? So the sandbox is just local. So at that point, your API is just there for you, or your backend is just there for you to kind of play with, get your front-end application running with it, make sure that your schema is the way that you want it, but it's only going to work in development. It's not going to be there yet for end users to use. You have to deploy it, and then once it's deployed, you have access to this full admin UI. Does that clarify the difference there? Awesome. So now it'll take a little bit for this to update. The one thing that I want to show you as this is deploying is that if you go back to this page, and this is the AWS console for this Amplify blog, you can go to Admin UI Management, and you can invite users via email, and this will give them access to this admin UI without them needing to have AWS accounts. So only one person needs to have an AWS account. Say you want to invite like marketing or product or somebody else who doesn't have AWS account, you can invite them via email, and then they have access to this whole admin UI. And you can give them different permissions too. So you could give them just access to the content and users. So maybe like a non-technical user that you don't want to change your schema, you might want to give them access to that. Whereas maybe you want your developer to have full access, and you can do that there. So that's another feature that I really like. Let's see. Oh no, our deployment failed. What should I do? It's the demo gremlins. I swear, they always get you. Applications will never work with this. So let me go to a completed version of this. Okay, we're all good. This is a different version of it, but it will save us from the demo bugs. So now that this has been, all my changes have deployed, so I have my blogs and comments, I can go ahead and create posts and create comments in here. So my awesome blog post. And then this is a markdown editor. Both of them are, all the text fields are markdown editors. So you can go ahead and add in different headers and things like that. And then you can also create and link to new comments and things like that too. So you can do all this. And so this is kind of that flow that I was talking about, that a lot of times you feel like you have to create the secondary app for the content managers and all of those people. And so this kind of takes that role for them. Then the authorization roles. So say I want to make it so that my posts only owners can update, delete, and create posts. I could do that. So that would make it so that only the person that created the post would have access to updating it in the future. So that would be an example of a rule. You could also do any sign-in user can read, for example, and you can also switch between these different authorization modes as well. So IAM, Cognito users, or API key, which would just be everybody has access to everything. Cool. And then you can also do the same for your users as well. So you can create new users through here. Cool. And this will allow me to sign in with this email to the application. There are also React components and Vue components that you can use so that you don't need to write the sign-in flow yourself. So if you don't want to write in the sign-in form or the sign-out button or anything like that, there are React components for that as well. So you can do let's see. This is the documentation for them. I was just like, I'm going to get the name of these wrong. So this will enable those UI React components. They also have them for Angular, Vue, web components, React Native. And then what we'll be able to do is in here, import with authenticator from so we'll be able to import this with authenticator, and then it's a higher order React component. So what that means is I can do with authenticator for this app, and that will make it so that anytime you try to access that app component, so at this point our homepage is going to make me sign in before I can see it. So just like that, you've got like full authentication for your app. Ooh, that's a good question. So regarding the models, is there a way to create models based in an existing DynamoDB? That's a great question. I know there are some guides for using existing data. Let's see. Yes. So you could use an existing AWS resource. You would have to tweak some things with your Amplify configuration.json. I'm not sure how this would work exactly with data store, so you'd have to play around with that a little bit, but these are the instructions for doing that. If that's something that you need to do. And I will need to rerun Amplify pull because I did changes in my application. So I'm going to do Amplify pull with my environment name as well. So you can also have different environments for development, production, staging, all those different things that you would have for a production application. You can have that within Amplify as well. And so you can see that it made me call my current environment staging. So it's going to ask me a couple questions here. My text editor is VS Code. I'm using a JavaScript, React. This is just going to be my build direction. So source build, npm run build, npm run start. Cool. And now I can run amplify pull, amplify push to pull and push changes. Come on, React, you got this. Get cheered on.
It's still pretty impressive how much it's actually doing behind the scenes. You know, I dabble in a little Dynamo, and I know how complicated that can be, and it's kind of blowing my mind how much of this is just handled and taken care of. It's really, really neat.
I have so much fun building with this. I feel really lucky to have been part of this launch because it still feels pretty magical to use to me too. So I used my email address and a password here, and I have to change to a new password because in the world where this application is actually being used, it was some administrator who created my account. And so now when I'm logging in for the first time, I have to create a real password. So and it'll ask me to verify my email too. I'm going to skip that for now because I'm not actually using this, but there we go. And now we're to this create new post page that we created before. So just like that, we've got full sign in and all that. I just imported a React component, this with Authenticator, and now we've got full sign in too. The other really nice thing about this is that Amplify has access to a bunch more AWS services. So we've used Cognito, we've used DynamoDB, but some other common ones would be AWS Lambda for creating serverless functions. You can do that through here. It would be amplify add function, and then it'll ask you a couple of questions about what you want to do with that function and permissions that you want the function to have. You can also do amplify add storage. So S3 is a service within AWS that allows you to host static files. So if you wanted to do images, video, audio, I created a video course platform with this. So there are a bunch of courses and videos, and I have all the videos stored up on S3. And so you can add that. You have to create a name for it. Within S3, you have to create buckets, and buckets are kind of like folders of information. That's the best way to describe it fast. And then it asks me who should have access. So should I have authenticated users only, or should my authenticated users and guest users have access to my content? And for the sake of the demo, I'll do auth and guest users, but it's always important to think what could somebody do badly in my application? Do I really want everybody to see these files? In this case, for sure. But now it's asking me, what kind of access do you want for authenticated users? Do I want them to be able to create and update data? Do I want our files to S3? Do I want them to be able to read them, delete them? So I will do read, create, update there. And then guest users, I want them to only be able to read or to view those images. I don't want them to be able to upload things to my S3 bucket. It can get a little bit dangerous if you let anybody upload things. Working at a boot camp, people would have their applications, people would upload inappropriate things to them. So something to always think about.
It's so cool that it just bakes in all of these things that I think are really commonly forgotten, like access control and authorization and bucket access and all these things that, every other week we're reading about some data compromise that was caused by a misconfigured S3 bucket. And it's, you know, it can happen to anybody. It's not the fault of the storage system, right? It's just the user. So I think it's so cool that this just walks you through it and asks you these questions as you're going. Cause I think 99% of the time, you know, this is exactly what you want. You're like, oh yeah, you should be logged in to do this. Yeah. Super cool.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Do I want a Lambda trigger? No, you can set up a Lambda function to run when you do things in your S3 bucket. And then in order to deploy this S3, I would need to run Amplify push. And then I could write my front-end application to use those images from that S3 bucket. I will send out resources on that. I have an egghead video and then also a couple tutorials there, so I can send those out. But just showing that all of the things that you could normally do with in the Amplify CLI, you can still do within an app that you generated with the admin UI. The other really nice thing is if you have Amplify apps already, you can enable this admin UI for them. So if you go to your Amplify app within the AWS console, you can click enable admin UI for those apps that existed before there was the admin UI. So it's forward and backwards compatible. Not sure what's going on there, but it's okay. Again, the live demo bugs, they always get you. The last thing that I want to do is deploy my front end so that that's live, even though it's just a button that says create new post. It's okay. So what I will do is I'm going to push this to a GitHub repo. So anybody else using the new GitHub CLI? I feel like it's such a game changer.
You're killing it. I've forgotten about it, and I try to use it, and then I don't know the commands, but as soon as you started creating a repo and doing all this from the command line, I was like, oh yeah, I really have to get back into that habit because it's supposed to be really good.
Yeah, especially for creating pull requests. I feel like it's so annoying to always go into the browser in order to have to do that. Like that whole flow drives me up the wall. And so to be able to create like a pull request from the command line, to me, just saves probably 10 minutes a day. So
easily. I have to just
really
reprogram
nice.
my brain for it. It's something I'm so used to either clicking the link or I've like another little bash script that I've ran, but it's the color, the you know, the live like contextual help, right? And like inline prompts and stuff are just so good. It looks like it's really, really nice.
Yeah, it's such a great tool. I'm so glad that they enabled that. So I'm going to go back to my admin blog here. I'm going to choose GitHub. It's going to allow me to choose from my repos in a second. Okay. Wait, it is up there, right? Oh, I didn't push. I still need to actually push things to GitHub. Okay. So now this is up. Let me check this out. Refresh. There we go. And I'll use my, let's see, rules. Save and deploy. And then this will build and deploy my front end. It will run my npm run build step for create React app and all that. So then every time that I push to my front end, it'll redeploy for me. So every time I push to that main branch, it will automatically do that. I can also create deployments for pull requests as well, so that there are previews for different branches and things as well. You can also set up custom domains here too. So, and environmental variables if you need those. So that was what I had to share with you today. It will finish building, but before we sign off, I'm open to any more questions because we definitely have a few more minutes here as well. But I also just want to say that the docs are at docs.amplify.aws, and the sandbox is sandbox.amplifyapp.com if you want to access that. Also, my team is hiring. So if you want to work on the code for this or do a job like mine where you talk about it and give people advice on using this and create blog posts and things, it's a pretty fun job. Reach out to me. I'm Ali Spittel pretty much everywhere on the internet, but probably most respond on Twitter. So feel free to send me a DM. My DMs are open. We have a ton of roles in software engineering, front-end engineering, web development, engineering management, etc. So I think that Natter, who is my boss, tweeted out like 11 roles this morning or something like that. But the link is amazon.jobs. And again, tweet me or DM me if you are interested.
Yeah, before we jump into questions, I just want to say thanks so much, Ali. This was awesome. I loved the demos. I loved you had this whole like litany of information to pull out, and it was so cool. And then you did it all like live, which is so impressive. And that always terrifies me personally. So huge props. That's so cool. I'm really excited about this. I can't wait to give it a try. I feel like everyone's pretty excited about this too. Seeing the chat go by, folks are pretty jazzed up. So that's super neat. Any questions for Ali, friends? It's so hard. Like we just scratched the surface. I didn't even realize that you could create mobile apps through this UI. It's super neat. I have some of the same questions that the other group had about like, how does this actually work under the hood? So I'm really excited to kind of peek beneath the covers and take a look at what's going on inside of like DynamoDB and CloudFormation and get kind of a read on that. But it's amazing. Obviously this is like, it's so much easier. It's like a whole another level of abstraction that's just so much easier than what we'd all used to have to do. So this is super neat.
For sure. And you can kind of see the cloud formation that's generated for a lot of this. There are different files. Let me see. Yeah, so there's this Amplify Admin blog cloud formation file right here. It's been something that I've had to dig into a lot recently as I've gotten more and more advanced use cases. But if this is something that you know about, or if you know like the CDK, the Cloud Development Kit, or any of the SDKs for JavaScript, you can kind of integrate those to an extent as well. So very extensible.
Yeah. I think Daniel has a question. What options are there for automation and auto scaling?
That's a great question. What exactly do you mean by that? Do you?
Hey, this is Daniel. Just thinking about, can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right, thinking about like how would you like how to deploy this? Like say you want to create an app and deploy new things without pulling and everything. Just like kind of like pushing to GitHub and stuff. If that makes sense.
Yeah. So again, in order to deploy anything, it would be Amplify push and then Amplify pull to pull any changes that you make using the admin UI down. There are also some really great articles that are either built into the documentation or are written by our developer advocates on working with teams. Let me see. There's a whole section on team environments. So if you want to know a little bit more about the environments and things like that, there is that. And also then within the Amplify console, there's a lot more information about that there as well. The Amplify console is what we use for hosting. Let's see. There's the documentation here. Hopefully those will answer those questions.
And then one of the neat things that you demoed was the kind of deploy straight from GitHub, like a pipeline process. Is that using like AWS code build under the hood?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's something you can be really configurable about. You can make decisions based on, like integration tests passing or failing, right? Things like that. In that team environment where you may have hundreds of developers working on a project, it seems like a really cool like extension where I can preview deployments are great. Like that's the new standard everywhere for front-end development. It's becoming the standard for back-end development. And I think it's super neat to see that just baked into the process.
Yeah. Yeah. It's nice because the AWS stuff is such a part of a lot of developers' workflow as is. So having it built into AWS, I think is really nice. Cool. Well, thank you all so much. And again, if anybody has questions, feel free to reach out, or if you're interested in roles also.
That's great. Ali, thank you so much for your time. Folks, thank you for attending. Like I said, at the beginning of the talk next month, we're going to have Jeremy Daly giving a talk. So you can connect with us on Twitter, on our website, Serverless MN, or on Meetup. I recorded this talk. So if those of you who are juggling kids or dealing with dinner and all the other life things, don't worry. I'll be uploading it to YouTube later tonight if my MacBook can keep up. So Ali, I just want to say thank you again to you and your team and all the hard work you do. We're really excited to kind of see what comes out of Amplify and the DevX team there because it's super neat. So really excited to continue to get updates on this. And thank you again for your time. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you all for hanging out. And this has been really, really fun.
Great. All right, everyone. Thanks again. Have a great rest of your day or evening, no matter where in the world you are. And we'll see you next time.